All right, science fiction fans, I've got a great video for you today. This is part of a series that I started doing called Collector's Corner, where it's more on the collecting side of science fiction than the reading side. I'm an avid reader and collector, mostly collecting paperbacks, and Clifford D. Simak has been one of my favorite science fiction authors for a really long time. And I started collecting some of his original first edition US paperbacks, and I realized I was pretty close to getting them all, so I went out of my way to find the last few I was missing, and I'm going to go through and show you every first edition, first printing paperback from Clifford Simak, as well as other editions that I have of the same novel, and I have all of his anthologies as well that I will be going through. So this video also kind of coincides with an event that's going on right now, hosted by Sean D. Standfast, and I've been able to take part in a few of these videos and these discussions, and once a month he's kind of been going through and reading a different novel by Simak, and they've been a lot of fun. He's an author that really, it's a really good way to flesh out the book and discuss these, because if you've read much of Simak, he asks a lot of questions, but he doesn't always give you all the answers. So they're great videos to kind of hash out everyone's kind of interpretation of what Simak is talking about in these books. We've noticed a lot of common themes, and it's just reinforced my love of Simak's writing. So at this time, I think I've read over 10 novels of his, and by the time we're through with this series, I'll probably have read everything he's written. And I'll show you a picture here. This is the 2025 schedule for going through Simak's novels, and this is going to go all the way into 2026. So just stay tuned for that and follow along if you'd like. Now, I'm going to mention the year that I'm going to go in chronological order of when these books were published. I'm not going to go based on when they were originally published in magazines at times. I'm going to go for the novel publication year that was usually on the copyright page of these. I want to talk about the cover artist if they're given, and just kind of go through each of these as we go. So the first novel that Simak published was called Cosmic Engineers. And this one is from Paperback Library. This is the first US printing of this one. And it has cover art here by Jack Gaughan. And I found this one. This is in pretty good shape, and it has some really interesting cover art there. So I have additional versions, later editions of this same novel. So this is the second printing, also from Paperback Library. And it also has cover art by Jack Gaughan. And this one, it isn't in the best shape. It has a little bit of a lean on the spine, but still pretty cool. Now this one, there was no credit for the artist on this one, but this is the third printing from Paperback Library. This first novel of his was all done by Paperback Library. And then I also have the fourth printing. This one also from Paperback Library, and we have some different unique art here. This one's by Del Sarte. And I apologize if I butcher any of these artists' names. So I basically have, I think it was only really published by Paperback Library at first. Have every edition of that. Now, the next book he published was called Time and Again in 1951. But when it was originally published by Dell, it was under the title First He Died. And this, like I said, is from 1951. We have cover art here by Walter Brooks. And this is a smaller rack size mass market paperback that Dell put out. And I really like these kind of smaller paperbacks. I'll put it up here next to a standard size paperback. And you can see they're a little bit smaller. I think they were designed to kind of fit in these spinner racks that were around at the time. And the next edition I have, we went back to and I should mention here, it says First We Died, but then down in parentheses it says Time and Again. And so after that, they switched the name up to Time and Again. And here I have an Ace paperback. This is another one of those smaller format. This is got cover art by Jack Gaughan as well. You'll notice a lot of the same cover artists. So his first book, Cosmic Engineers, had some art by Jack Gaughan. And then I got this later, Ace Printing. Has some really interesting artwork here. There was no credit given to the artist on this one, but it's really interesting, almost a little psychedelic there. And then the last one I have from Time and Again is another Ace reprint, and this has cover art by Ramis Koukoulas. And what's interesting too is just, it seems like these are two different books, but it just has, I guess, paper size and font size makes one look like it's a lot longer of a book. So that's Time and Again. Now, there is an oddity that I'm going to talk about. Clifford Simak got a manuscript from John W. Campbell for a book Campbell wasn't happy with. Campbell wrote it, he wasn't really happy with it, so he asked Simak to rewrite it, and so Simak took it home, rewrote it, turned it into John W. Campbell, and Campbell didn't like it. And the novel is called Empire. I have this kind of weird armchair fiction. It's a double, but it's modern, and I'm curious to read this one. Sean D. Standfast is where I got most of the information on this book. So after Campbell refused to put it into print, he wasn't happy with it. It later got printed by another publisher. I'm not exactly sure, but Sean could chime in on that one. So now we have 1952, one of Simak's most notable works, and that's City. This was published in the magazines earlier, but the first novelized format of this book came out in 1952 by Permastar, and it was issued at 25 cents. This is kind of my prized possession in all of my Simak books. It's in really good shape. This was one that I was just waiting to get, and I finally found this. I found it for $17, which I think is a great deal from a bookseller that I've used many times in the past. And they said it was in very good condition, and I would agree. I think for a book this age, and this was a bit of a pulpier publisher. I don't think these books hold up too well. If you've seen these in the wild, there's a lot of splitting and chipping on the spines of these, but really happy with this one. The cover art here is by Richard Powers, and you'll see a lot from Richard Powers. This one has a slightly different feel for Powers, but still really like the cover art of that one. So now we have another later reprint from Ace, and this is one of the smaller rack size mass market paperbacks. And this has cover art by Ed Valigursky, and I've probably butchered that name. But you'll see this one, there's different versions that have the same picture, but it's in different sizes and different kind of formats on the book. But that's a great one to have too. Then I have another later reprint from Ace, and this one's got a really interesting cover. This is by Davis Meltzer, and this one's in pretty good shape here. And so that covers it for City. Now the next book was Ring Around the Sun, and this has the first printing was by Ace in one of these rack size mass markets. And this has cover art by Robert E. Schultz. And this is a really cool book. Might be my second favorite in my collection. I just really like these smaller Ace books. They're great when you can get them in good condition. This one doesn't even really have that much yellowing in there. The spine is in really good shape. It still feels really tight, like no one has ever read it. And so I'm really happy with that one. Okay, next we have another later reprinting of this by Avon. And we've got no credit on the cover art here. This is just a standard size Avon book with the painted text block. But that's a nice one as well. Okay, so now we're getting into, let's see, Trouble with Tycho. This is more of a novella, but it was published as a standalone. I should mention, if some of these books could have come out in ace doubles, but I'm not really a fan of the ace doubles as far as the collecting aspect goes. So I'm really going for standalone novels when I'm going after my collections. So this one was published originally in 1960. This printing came out quite a bit later, but it's I believe the only paperback version of this book. Okay, next we have Time is the Simplest Thing. This book was published in 1961. I have this Crest first printing, and this has cover art by Richard Powers. Oh, I forgot to mention, this had cover art by Michael Whalen. You'll see a few by Whalen in here, but this one, going back to this, Richard Powers did a lot of cover art for Simik's books, and you'll notice a lot as we go through here. So this is a Crest book. It's in really good shape. This book was originally published in 1961, and really like that one. So the next one is They Walked Like Men, and this is from McFadden Books. So we can see Simak he jumped around to a lot of different publishers early in his publishing career. And this one is another one that is just in really great shape. I was really happy to find this one. And this is got cover art by Richard Powers as well. So 1962, They Walked Like Men. Now I do have another later printing of this one by Manor Books. And I gotta say, I like the first edition a lot better than this, but this one's still not bad. This has cover art by Tony DeStefano, and I probably really butchered that name. Okay, now we go to Simik's probably second most popular book, or it could even be tied with City, and that's Way Station. Now the first printing in paperback was this one here by McFadden, and I managed to score this almost fine condition. I would call this near fine condition. This book came out in 1963, and this one has cover art by Richard Powers. And it is just, it's got the painted text block. It is in immaculate shape. There's really no yellowing to the pages. This book obviously has never been read. It would be a prized possession. It kind of is, but I'm not a huge fan of the layout and the cover art and all of that. But it's still a really nice copy, and I'm glad to have that. So I also have a later reprint that was also by McFadden Books. Has some different cover art here. This is by Jack Farasago, and just quite a bit different here. And then the last copy, well, I guess I have one more. So we got a Manor Books edition of Way Station, and this had no credit to the artist. So didn't know who was the artist on that one. And then I do also have a book club edition of this one. And sorry for the glare. This is got cover art by Jim Bauman. Jim Bauman. And so that's got some really interesting cover art. I really like that one. Okay, so next up, 1965, All Flesh is Grass. And we have another new publisher for Simik. This is Berkeley Books. So the first printing came out from Berkeley. And this one has no credit to the cover artist, But it's just got that kind of cool image of a face in the grass there. And then I also have a later printing from Avon. And if you've read this one, those flowers do have quite a bit of meaning for the story. I do like this cover almost equally as much as the first printing. And this has cover art by Jan Estevez. So we got that one. Okay, next up, the werewolf principle. We see we go back to Berkeley for the first printing, and this has got cover art by Richard Powers. This was a recent read with Sean and company, and I really like that one. We also have the werewolf principle in the Daw edition. And I think there was about 6 Daw reprints. They were never the first printing of any of Simak's novels, but they have some of the best artwork. And I have, as we go through here, I have about 3 of them, but I've almost finished collecting everything that I want from Simak. There's a couple copies that I'd like maybe a better condition, and I would like to collect all of the Daws and have a complete set of Simak's Daws because they just have such great cover art. So next up is 1967, Why Call Them Back from Heaven? And this originally came out as its first printing as a Ace science fiction special. And we have cover art by Leo and Diane Dillon on this one. And so this is kind of an interesting one that it was published in the series that Terry Carr put out for the Ace Science Fiction Specials Series 1. And then I also have a later printing from Avon. This one's in great condition. This, we have cover art by Jan Estevez again. So that's the second one from Jan. And then next up is 1968, The Goblin Reservation. And we'll see a lot of these, he went through a stretch here with Berkeley being the first printing publisher of the paperbacks. I really like this one. We got cover art by Richard Powers. This is one that I would like to upgrade because the spine is a bit creased and leaning. And I also have a later Berkeley reprint of The Goblin Reservation. And this one has cover art by Ken Barr. And this is our January 2025 read. So if you want to follow along and take part in the live that Sean does, this is one that Sean has highly recommended. This I've read a lot, and this is the #1 book that I want to read. So I'm really excited that January we're going to be reading that one, and we'll be doing a live at the end of the month for that one. Okay, next up is Out of Their Minds, and this came out in 1970, and I have this Berkeley first printing with some really interesting cover art here by Herbert Norton Rogoff. And this is one that I would like to upgrade. It's got crease and leaning on the spine, but this was the first printing paperback of that one. Now, this has a Daw edition as well, and this one is great. All the Daws are done by Kelly Freas, as far as I know. I believe so. All the ones I have are by Kelly Freas, and I think all the other ones are as well. Okay, next up is 1971, Destiny Doll. And this is the book we just read in December. Very interesting book, and I really enjoyed it. This has cover art, or there was no credit on this cover art here, but I have a Berkeley later printing as well, and this has cover art by Richard Powers. So we're still in the Berkeley era. Next up, A Choice of Gods, 1972, and we have a Berkeley first printing of this one with cover art by Vincent DeFate. And then I also have a later printing from Del Rey, Ballantine Del Rey, and this one has cover art by Ralph Brillhart. And This is a book I really like of Simak, and I really like that cover art with the pastels and all that going on for it. Okay, another first printing from Berkeley, Cemetery World. This came out in 1973. And this has cover art by Vincent DeFate again. So we see kind of a pattern with cover arts and publishers. I also have the Daw reprint of this one with cover art by Kelly Freas. And then next up is Our Children's Children, another one from Berkeley, first printing. This came out in 1974. And we have cover art by Richard Powers, slightly different than his normal kind of look, but it's still there. It almost looks like it could be a Millennium Falcon there with a bunch of people, but 1974. Okay, now we have Enchanted Pilgrimage, once again, first printing from Berkeley. This has cover art by Phil Lair, 1975. I also have a later Del Rey Fantasy reprint of this one, a different edition. So there was a few books that Simak wrote that kind of had a fantasy feel, and this was one of them. And that one's cover art was by Daryl K. Sweet. So let's show that again. Daryl K. Sweet. And then I do have a book club as well, which has the same cover art as the first edition from Berkeley. So, and there's nothing on the back. So that was Phil Lair that had done the first edition cover art. Okay, once again with Berkeley, we have Shakespeare's Planet. And this came out in 1976. And we have cover art by Phil Lair. As you go through this, he published a book a year pretty much from 1960 onward. There was a couple years where he published more than one book, but looking back here, I don't think he really missed a year. Maybe 1969 was the only one. So next up, Berkeley first printing A Heritage of Stars. And this one also has cover art by Phil Lair. And then I also have the book club of that one, which has the same cover art, and there's nothing on the back. Okay, we're getting towards the end here. So now Simak switched over, and all of the last books here are all published by Ballantine Del Rey. So we have Macedonia. And this has cover art by H.R. Van Dongen, published in 1978. And then The Fellowship of the Talisman, published by Del Rey Fantasy. This is another one that was kind of more of his fantasy ones. This has cover art by Michael Whalen. And this is one that I'd like to upgrade because it looks like a rat or something chewed on the top of that one. And then we have The Visitors. This was published in 1980. There was no credit to the cover artist on this one. And then Project Pope, which is a real standout book for me. Read this with Sean earlier in 2024. Really like this one. This was published in 1981. And we have cover art by Rowena Morrill. Next up is Special Deliverance, 1982. Cover art by Michael Whalen. And then another one of his more fantasy novels, Where the Evil Dwells, published in 1982 as well, with cover art by Michael Whalen. And then his last published novel was Highway of Eternity, once again published by Del Rey Books, with cover art by David Schlenkenhofer. And this was his last published novel. I also have a book club edition of this one. Actually, no, this is a first printing. We got the price on the dust jacket. It's got the deckled pages. Really like that. And I don't really go out of my way to collect these hardbacks, but when I come across one for cheap enough, I'll get them. So now let's go on to his short story collections. All right, his first short story collection was Strangers in the Universe, and this was published by Berkeley Books for 35 cents. It's a rack-sized, smaller mass market paperback with cover art by Richard Powers. And that is definitely typical Richard Powers style there. I also have a later printing, also from Berkeley, with cover art by Richard Powers as well. This is a standard size mass market paperback. And this one's in really great shape. It's got the painted text block. And then I also have a book club edition that just kind of has a boring cover, but I'd found that for pretty cheap. Okay, next up is The Worlds of Clifford Simak. This is published by Avon. And this also has cover art by Richard Powers. And this one I found in really great condition, the green painted text block. And then All the Traps of Earth, McFadden Books. This was published in 1962. Has cover art by Richard Powers. I have a later Manor Books printing of this one. And then the next one is All the Traps of Earth, published in one more edition of that. I have an Avon edition of All the Traps of Earth as well. And then The Other Worlds of Clifford Simak. This one is from Avon. This one is in not very good condition. Has cover art by Richard Powers, but I would definitely like to upgrade this one at some point. And then Worlds Without End from Belmont. This came out in 1964 and has cover art by Richard Powers. The Best Science Fiction Stories of Clifford Simak by Paperback Library. This came out in 1967 and has cover art by Armand Weston. And then So Bright the Vision. This is from Ace. There was no credit to the cover artist here. This came out in 1968. Has some really nice cover art there. It's kind of a repeat of what's on the cover. And then his last short story collection that was published in paperback was called Skirmish, and this came out from Berkeley Books. And this has cover art by Frank Riley. And then I do have one other short story collection that was never printed in paperback, but it's called Over the River and Through the Woods. My wife found this in Denver recently on a trip she went on. Has cover art by Michael Dachau, and it came out in 1996 by Tachyon Press. So that's everything I've got. I'm really happy to have all the novels now, especially doing this read along with Sean. I'm ready to go every month. My biggest question is whether I put these on my shelf in publication order or in alphabetical order. So that's the one thing I'm trying to decide. Maybe you can give me your advice. I typically go with alphabetical order, but now that I have everything, I'm tempted just for Simak to kind of put him in publication order. It'd be kind of a neat thing. At least maybe group the first edition paperbacks together, or the first printing ones. But if you made it through this whole video, thanks for watching. Hope you follow along on some of our reads in the future, or if you see this video in the future, you can go back and watch our discussions on these novels from Simak. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.